Hotel Transylvania is back with its fourth installment in this franchise. It's pretty crazy to think that we have 4 Hotel Transylvania movies now to talk about. This one's heading to streaming on Prime Video, and I got some thoughts because I've overall really enjoyed this franchise. But is this the best one, or is it the one that puts it in the ground? What's going on, buddy? Welcome back to a brand new movie review. Today we're going to be discussing Hotel Transylvania Transformania. This is about when Van Helsing's mysterious invention, the monstrification ray, goes haywire. Drac and his monster pals are transformed into humans, and Johnny becomes a monster. And their new mismatched bodies, Drac stripped off his powers, and of course, Johnny, the loving live monster that must team up and race across the globe to find a cure before it is too late. Now, when it comes down to the Hotel Transylvania, I've pretty much enjoyed each and every one of them. 1, 2, and 3 kind of brought me back to the era of early Cartoon Network shows. And a lot of that was because of Genndy Tartakovsky being the director of those first 3. But this time around, he is not directing. He did assist with the story, and the likes of Adam Sandler is not back as the voice of Dracula. So again, in that time, I was a little bit nervous going into this one. I can still say that this one is enjoyable, but at the same time, it did feel a little bit like a TV movie, and we will discuss that in certain layers and avenues. But the one thing I do want to say, guys, if you guys are new here and you love talking movies just as much as I do, because I'm sure if you hear you love talking movies, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so we can keep talking movies over here on a daily basis. It's my favorite thing to do is join with you guys down below in the comment section and see your guys' thoughts on all the latest films. Of course, with any review, I love starting with the pros, and the main thing I do want to talk about once again is the animation for all these Hotel Transylvania movies have always been some of my favorite things that they have done, and this movie continues that grand, beautiful, colorful animation that feels new, at the same time reminiscent of some older animation films that I really like. It has this 2D effect that is also 3D. I don't know how to really much describe it, but it's always been very pleasant to look at, and all the sequences, the attention to detail, the way that they transform and create these monsters in every movie has always been such a fun vibe of it all. And I think Hotel Transylvania 4 continues that, especially with seeing how some of these monsters end up turning into humans and seeing how one of the humans, Johnny, ends up turning into a monster. The attention to detail in all of those sequences were very beautiful, and in the same sense, I enjoyed it. It was visually appealing. One of the other things that I really liked about these movies is the way that it's always so sweet in its nature and its messaging. It's never too much for kids to enjoy this, but it's also never too much for adults to sit down and watch it with their kids. These are really good family movies, and one of the things that I like about this is the opening of this movie very much establishes that sweet sincerity that we've always liked. One of the core relationships in this entire franchise is the father-daughter relationship between Drac and his daughter, and I've always really much liked that, and this movie starts off once again with that avenue. It lays out easily the best elements of this entire franchise is that relationship in here. It does come down to the Hotel Transylvania movie. The last movie I thought was a little bit too kiddie for me. I still enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. And I do think that this one is probably the better one out of that third one. It's kind of mixed in there because I think the first 2 are actually really great, especially the first one. 2, 3, and especially this one do feel more into the vein of Cartoon Network, like TV movies, and that's not like a pro or a con to it. It just doesn't feel grand in its scope for its story. But I will always give credit where credit is due for these movies because it is always refreshing, and whether it's with the humor and the monsters and the way that they play off those vibes, or in general this time around seeing how they're switching bodies and switching into this Freaky Friday tone, there is a lot of fun avenues to have in there, and I do appreciate how each of these movies is refreshing in its own right, and especially even with its messaging and story. A lot of these are classic monsters. You got the Invisible Man, you have the werewolf, you have Dracula, you have Frankenstein, you have a mummy. You have so many grand monsters in here that they play around with a lot of fun vibes in there, and I've always just really liked how they were able to do that. Again, I think this movie is purely more for kids, and if you're an adult who's taking your kid to show them on a streaming service like, hey, let's watch this movie together as a family, you're gonna sit there and enjoy it. But, you know, if your kid's probably a teenager and you're also an adult, you might sit there and be like, I don't know if they're gonna like this. They might think it's fun. I thought it was fun, but it's not a movie that I would definitely go back and revisit fully. I think that's where it comes down to my mixed element of this thing, because there was two things missing from this film that, again, I mentioned I was a little bit worried going into. Genndy was not the director anymore of this. He was the writer, and I think there's a little bit of his style missing from his direction inside this film. Nothing going along to the other directors. I think they did a solid job in here. There's just this fluid nature that Genndy has to his direction. I really much apologize if I'm mispronouncing that name. That's just how I've always said it as a kid, and I'm still going to continue to say it. But there's something of his nature, of the way that he fluidly directs movies, where this movie is only like an hour and 35 minutes, and it felt a bit longer than that, where the other Hotel Transylvania movies felt in the same length, the same runtime, but the pacing was a little bit more fluid, and I really do think that's due to his direction. Someone I'm really a big fan of is Brian Hall, who does a lot of impressions. He is doing Dracula this time around, not Adam Sandler. And I will say, at first, I could hear the little bit of differences in Brian's voice compared to Adam Sandler. Eventually, he did finally settle into the role of it all. But even then, I still always felt like there was this lingering aspect that was a little bit different to my ears. And it kind of bugged me throughout the entire thing, but not fully. Like, this is like such a minor nitpick, because Brian did a really good job impersonating Dracula's voice from what Adam Sandler used to do. This is now where I go down to my one con of this film that did actually bother me. We've seen 4 films now in this franchise, and it just feels like these characters retread and backtrack on their arcs that they have already superseded in the last movies. It never feels like anyone has really much grown in their arcs. There's a fun element to be had in there, but there's this same resolution that I feel like that we have gotten in the last 3 movies with the relationship between Dracula and, of course, Johnny, and even some of the other characters, but definitely their core relationship. And it just feels like, again, it's backtracked here and it's backtracked. And I get it. It's a fun running joke that Johnny annoys Dracula, but it's gotten to a point where it's like, okay, so like if they do a 5th one, is it just because whatever happens is because Johnny annoyed Dracula again? I wouldn't like to see that, and I do think that this is a nice conclusion for the story of Dracula in movie form. I wouldn't mind seeing short stories, or even in general an actual show of this on Cartoon Network or something of that nature. I think there would be a lot of fun for that for kids. But I do think when it comes down to the movies, there's not much more that you can do with these characters unless you're going to, again, retread and backtrack. It's been my one issue with the last 3 sequels that they've done from this movie, because it just feels like it's always a retread of the same arc. It's just me. I'm almost 25 years old reviewing a movie called Hotel Transylvania Transformania. I love animation. It's one of my favorite things in film. And for me, I enjoyed this movie for what it was. It's nothing new. It's nothing great, but it's something fun for the families. And I think that's just really much what we need nowadays. There's not a lot of great animation films that really much appeal to everyone out there. There was last year. There was a lot of great animation, but when I say to this year, it doesn't seem like we're getting too much, and I think if families are just looking for something to show their kids, this is going to be one that you're going to be able to watch and be like, that was enjoyable. I like the refreshing take of certain elements and jokes that they play with the Freaky Friday tone of monsters turning into humans and playing on the likes of Dracula, Frankenstein, Mummy, and even more of those classic characters, because I grew up with all those classic monster characters. And I've always had fun with this franchise. I don't think it's the greatest animation franchise of all time. I also don't think it's the worst, but I do think it was missing a couple layers that could have made it even the best Hotel Transylvania yet. And that is why Hotel Transylvania Transformania is good, but could have been better. So with all that said, I'm going to give this film a B-. Again, I could have nitpicked this thing to the bits of it, but I enjoyed it for what it was, and I think a lot of you guys will as well. So thank you so much for watching this, guys, and make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, comment down below your guys' thoughts, and of course, until next time, stay classy.